Hi everyone, and welcome to another watercolor tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to paint 3 different bookmarks using 3 different floral designs. So let's get started. For the first one, we're going to be painting sweet peas, and these flowers are gorgeous and they're really fun to paint because they're quite easy. So what you're going to do is dip your paintbrush in water, and you're going to basically create the shapes of the flower petals, and you can't really see it because I'm just using water. So you can either use just water or you can use a very light wash of purple, since that's the color we're going to be using for the sweet peas. And once you've created your shape for the flower petals, you're going to outline the shape, keeping in mind that it still has to be wet, with a very pigmented purple on your paintbrush. And you can also just add some random ink, or not ink, but rather pigment to the opposite corners of each flower petal, and then naturally allow that pigment to spread, bleed, and blend into the water that you put down first. And that's why I love this design. When you first paint it on, it looks a little bit scattered, but as time goes on and the paint disperses, it bleeds and dries into this beautiful and delicate pattern. So don't stress too much if it doesn't look that great when you initially paint it on. Give it a few minutes and it will dry into a very beautifully blended flower petal. You can also add a little bit of greenery or some stems to your sweet peas. So I just used a little bit of dark green here, and I painted on a little bulb coming from where the leaves of my sweet peas meet, or rather the flower petals. And I also added a stem coming from that little bulb, but you don't have to. You don't even have to paint these on every single one. You can basically just do it wherever there is white space, because that's what I was trying to do. I was just trying to fill in some of the white space. So here you can see me even adding some leaves to the stem because there was extra white space, and I didn't want to fill that white space with painting extra sweet pea flower petals, because I felt like that would have forced the design a little bit, and it's always good to have a little bit of white space and contrast anyway. I sped this part up because I felt like you got the idea, but I even added some little bulbs with, I guess, the pre-flower, so before it sprouts, and you can do that as well. Once that first layer has completely dried, you want to go over the flower petals using the exact same technique that we used earlier, just to darken the colors and to add a little bit of contrast. Don't forget to peel your tape off if you opted to tape the edges, and you're all finished. Moving on to the second design. This time we're going to be painting roses or carnations, however you interpret this flower, but basically you're just going to take red watercolor and make sure that it's quite pigmented, so you don't want a lot of water on your brush, but mostly pigment, and you're going to create these sort of half moons or even triangles in a circular shape. So wherever there's sort of a gap, you're going to paint a new triangle as long as you're going in that circular shape. And this is because this is what gives that illusion of layers for roses. I sped this process up a little bit because I felt like you got the point from the first flower that I painted, and I didn't want it to be too repetitive. Make sure to vary the placement of your roses so that the card looks elegant and not redundant. As I did for the first bookmark, I'm also going to add some greenery and foliage to this bookmark, and again this is to add some contrast, especially because we only used one color for this particular bookmark, and that being red, so adding some green leaves really provides a really nice contrast, but it also fills up some of that awkward white space that we couldn't fill in with other roses. By the way, I just want to take this opportunity to remind you to subscribe to my channel if you are enjoying this video, and also don't forget to hit the like button. Alright, so moving on to the last card, I really like painting these kinds of flowers. We are going to be painting hydrangeas for this particular bookmark, and what you want to do is basically paint on a bunch of circles really close to one another, but you're going to want to use a lighter pigment than I'm using here. I used a darker pigment so that you could see exactly what I was doing, because if I only used water, we'd kind of run into the same situation as the sweet peas in the first bookmark where you couldn't see what I was painting because it was translucent. So you just want to paint a bunch of circles really close to one another, some even touching, but the key thing is to leave a very tiny white space between each cluster of 3 circles. And this is because we're going to be adding a few details later that sort of rely on that white space. If you can't create enough white space, that's totally okay. It's not detrimental to this flower design. While your circles are still wet, you want to dab in some more pigment in sort of the more center of the hydrangea and not so much towards the borders. And this is because in the center of the hydrangea, that's where I guess most of the flowers are. That's where the flower petals most cluster, so that's where it's going to be darker. And you can see me here just painting some more hydrangeas using different colors, so I sped up the process because I was using the exact same process as the first flower. And you want to just keep adding more and more pigment to the center of the flower just to increase the contrast between the petals in the center and the petals on the outside. Once your layers have completely dried, you want to take the color that you were working with for whichever particular hydrangea you're painting. So in this case, I'm taking a pink pigment, and you want to make sure it's highly pigmented, so very little water on your brush, and you're outlining those tiny white spaces that should have been in between each cluster of 3 circles. And again, if you don't have very many, it's okay. You can just paint random tiny circles in the center of your hydrangea and not towards the outside petals. And you also want to fill in any white spaces with the pigment as well. So you'll typically have little triangles of pigment or kind of hourglass shapes in between the circles. You want to fill all of those in the center of your hydrangea. Again, you want to stay away from the outside petals. You can also add some green foliage, as I did with the previous 2 cards, just to give a little bit more pop and color to your card, but also fill in that white space. And that's it, guys! Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and check out some of my previous uploads.